So, welcome, friends, to the Friday evening Sangha. Friday evening for most of you. For two of you, though, this is Thai time. This is Saturday morning. So, welcome, Daniel and Sebastian. They're both here in southern Thailand with me. In fact, Daniel's right out there in the yard someplace. So, DJ, you've got a question.
Yeah. So I have a little question. Been having, a fair bit of conversations on the Discord, and the topic of jhana comes up, fairly frequently. And I find like when addressing it as like a question, because sometimes it can come up like rather solidified and all that stuff, is to break it down again into like the five jhana factors. And like these are things that we can actually like work with, right? So again, the
Mm-hmm.
applied and sustained wholesome thought, removing the hindrances, the piti and the sukha. So these are like things we can cultivate rather than like this sort of solidified thing that we crave. I was just wondering like what your input on that would be in terms of like if somebody asked, like breaking it down like that.
Okay. Well, we can go into quite a lot of detail with this. Okay, so the first thing to mention is that one of the first things that the Buddha taught in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, he taught the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths, and he also taught the middle path. And that middle path is problematic for the West because it's not clearly defined in language that we would understand. Okay, and that one of the things that we can kind of glean is that the higher jhanas are known for being very, very pleasurable, and that getting attached to those high pleasures is the same thing as getting attached to going to the brothels or to the bars or to the sports games. Okay, it's the same kind of thing, and that normally the middle path is thought to be on one end to be self-flagellation, self-criticism, harming oneself, wanting revenge, and then on the other side is this pleasurable thing. But when we understand it correctly, we can understand it that self-flagellation that he was quite good at. I mean, you've seen the images of the starving Buddha and all of that was because he was with the Jains for possibly a couple of years after he had gone all the way through the jhanas. That in fact, if you understand that, you can kind of start to discount the jhanas as a big item because the Buddha been there, done that, and abandoned it. But now, when we get to the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, specifically in relationship to the middle path, it appears that the middle path then is between the higher jhanas and no jhana at all. And so the middle path there would then be the first jhana, which the Buddha also talks about as the first jhana is the path to enlightenment. That's in Sutta number 36, as well as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So we've got a couple of Sutta references now that we can begin to build the point. So one of the ways of understanding it is that the second, third, and fourth jhanas are natural outcomes of the first jhana. That in fact, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about it in the sense of both Paticca Samuppada and the jhana, because they're kind of together in that, is that when the mind is fit for work. When the mind is fit for work is a very important point. What that means is, number one, we can already control our feelings, that where our bad feelings or any kind of feelings are not messed up with what we're doing, that we can get away from the feelings so that the mind can function correctly. Ah, Alex, glad to see you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, glad to see y'all too. How are you, Sangha?
Well,
So,
Hello.
all right. So, the first jhana Welcome. Alex, we'll just continue on with the conversation and let you catch up with it. Okay, so we're talking about the first jhana as the base point, not what many people in the West think of as access concentration. How many have ever heard the term access concentration? Guess what? There's no place in the suttas. It doesn't exist. Okay, you're either in hindrances, and when you come out of the hindrances, then you're in the first jhana. That's basically it. We have to be free from the hindrances, and when we are free from the hindrances, free from unwholesome thoughts, now we can see things clearly. But when we are free from the unwholesome thoughts, then something really interesting is going on, and that is that everything that we see, everything that we notice, everything that we work with, etc., like that, is all wholesome because we've removed the unwholesome. That most of the time people spend their time trying to figure out what's going on based upon unwholesome feelings and ideas and thoughts and whatever like this, mostly from the past. So if we can remove these hindrances, we can make the mind fit for work. And the question would be then, well, what does that mean? And the answer to that is, what is fit for work are all of these wholesome things that would be characteristics or hallmarks of the higher jhanas.
Okay.
Okay. This is the important way that, in fact, this stuff is talked about in Sutra number 111 and one by one as they occur, where it points out that Sariputta was able to do the whole show in 2 weeks. The whole show, 2 weeks. Everything that the Buddha teaches, all the way to the absolute end. In fact, at the end of the sutta, they make a point of that Sariputta has come to the end of it all. Okay, so 2 weeks, they call it a fortnight. Fortnights are kind of common in the old days because it was the new moon and the full moon. And so in that period of time, now the question would be, was Sariputta already capable of the first jhana before that 2-week period started? The likelihood is very, very high that he was, because he came out of that tradition before he met the Buddha. He was already deeply into it. All right. But the sutta in that point, then after the 2 weeks, it takes, he says, starting with being well secluded from unwholesome states, well secluded from the mind, Sariputta entered into the first jhana with all of the factors of the first jhana. What are the first jhana's factors? Okay, well, they're listed in that sutta. They're listed in many suttas. They're listed in the Anguttara. And the funny thing about the later literature, like in the Anguttara, they have 6 factors for first jhana that have to be collected together. And in all of the other sutras in the Majjhima Nikaya, there are 5 factors. What's the additional factor? The additional factor is relaxation of the body, which is precisely what is in step 4 of Anapanasati. So you can see that the jhana dudes of the day added that 6th one because it's necessary anyway. So getting the body relaxed, getting the body comfortable, getting the body in a secluded place is all about reality. You guys have probably heard about affirmations, self-help books, that kind of thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason why they don't work is because the person doesn't really believe it, because it's not part of their reality.
Right.
So we have to, in fact, now look at that we actually want to be in a physical reality that matches what we're doing mentally, which means that we get the body secluded, we get it relaxed, we get it satisfied, we get it safe and secure. If we can get the body relaxed, safe and secure and comfortable, then that's the basis of reality to start with. So, gathering these factors together, we start with the body. before we ever sit down. When we do sit down, we sit down to relax, etc. Right? And we relax in a safe, secure place. So that's one of the points that we're making, because now we're going to start talking ourselves into the very reality that we've already created physically. And that is to talk ourselves into feeling safe, secure, relaxed, comfortable, which that will lead then into satisfaction. Okay. Once we do the satisfaction, and that's the key word, satisfaction. Why? Because satisfaction, by the way, is the word Pali is sukha, which is the exact opposite of the word dukkha, which means dissatisfaction. So we're actually now, if we can get that part of the first jhana, we don't even have to have all of the jhana factors yet together, and we've already got ourselves out of the dukkha, which is the exact teaching of the Buddha. So you can see when he figured that right there, oh, I got it now, the first jhana, that's where it's at. Now what happens is that we keep doing this over and over and over and over again, and getting ourselves into the, not just with the body, but with the mind, and now with the feelings, that we actually feel safe, secure, comfortable, satisfied over and over again. We add that next ingredient that's the tip point, and that is success. We can do it. We know that we can do it. And this success is actually something that's emphasized in several sutras, but for some reason we miss it. So I'll stop there. Aaron, you have a question?
Yeah. So this, the physical, surroundings and the body and the comfort there, and basically reminding yourself that this is comfortable, this is safe, I was looking at the hindrances today, and what I was looking at, it was pointing out that it's an overemphasis on certain things, right? So the hindrance of anger is an overemphasis on the fault of whatever it is, right? So if you're doing the opposite of that, you're not looking at what's wrong, you're looking at what's right.
Yes.
So you're making that more salient. So instead of bullshitting yourself about this being so bad over here, you're actually saying, well, wait a minute, this is actually pretty good over here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That one of the ways that I talk about that is that when we were all tender infants, in order to survive, we were nourished. Those infants, tender infants that were not nourished when they were very tender infants, either die outright or they die inside. And one of the ways that that happens is called an abandonment issue, to where people, an example of the abandonment issue is the girl just got married now and he's got a new husband, but every time he leaves the house, she starts a fight because she would rather have him there fighting with her than miss him when he's gone, because then this terror of being alone and abandoned will occur. Okay, so we need to have that nourishment to get started. Unfortunately, it ends sometime around the age of 4 to 6, depending upon whether a sibling is born, and then you become mommy's little helper instead of mommy's little baby. You graduate from mommy's little baby to mommy's little helper. You see that difference? Okay. Because what does that mean? It means from now on, that young child, every one of us, is now going to be living in a world looking for what's wrong, looking for problems to solve, looking for improving the place. You have to become a patriot. You have to join a political party. You have to get a job. You have to do all of these rules that you picked up and learned. And Aaron, you're absolutely correct that what we're really doing here is taking the emphasis off of the negative aspects of life and promoting the positive aspects of life over and over and over again, because you can see that you've done it like this. Over the years, you have piled up a huge amount of rules and negativities and let us say mistakes that we've made, uh, disasters we've created or gotten had to us, etc., like that. We've got a huge pile of crap. The Buddha calls this the path, or the past, or the sankharas have all been built up. So now we have to not just change one time and say, oh, I'm just going to have positive thoughts. That's going to be enough. No, we have to do it over and over and over and over again until we finally get convinced ourselves that we can do this. We can live a positive life. All I have to do is remember to stay out of the negativity and come back into the positivity. Okay, so this point then, that point of being a winner, is adding the final ingredient now to the jhana, and that is called the piti. Now, what piti is means that I feel really good. I feel like on top of the world. Okay, the Buddha was known as a lion. This is also the word that we use as sammasankappa, which means a change of attitude from that loser's attitude that everything has worked. There's all these problems that need to be solved. I've got to up 2, 3, 4. I got to do what I was told to do. And now we're coming into the positive, that winner's mentality of anything that needed to be done has already been done. I got nothing to do anymore. I'm fine. I got everything I need. I'm great. In fact, I am in charge of my life. I'm on top of my world. Right? You probably heard me say someplace or another that everyone is an emperor of their own pile of dirt. But those emperors who are losers are buried under their pile of dirt or climbing their way out. But the winners are just sitting on top of the world. This is what the supramundane means, and in Nepali it means lokatara, to be on top of it, be on top of the world, your world. Not the world of concepts, not the world of Chicago or Maui or Australia or anything else that you can think of, because when you think of those places, they're only concepts in the mind. Your world is the real world that you can touch, see, hear, sense, taste, smell. But the world that you can think of is not real world, it's just a world of concepts. And the real world is marvelous. The real world is wonderful. The real world's got air right here. All we have to do is take a deep breath and enjoy. And so this is that attitude that's built up. And when we have, number one, freedom from hindrances, number two, we have that sukha. That sukha, which is the satisfaction that comes with safety, security, and comfort of the body. And once we get that security and that safety and that comfort going, then we can be satisfied. And there's that point about freedom from dukkha right there. And then when we do it over and over and over again, we get the attitude, I can do this. I'm a winner now. I'm on top of it. So those are the jhana factors, the first jhana's factors. You can walk and talk and live your life in that sort of state. The fourth jhana probably will get you arrested if you're out driving under the influence of jhana, because you can't drive, you can't think, you can't talk. You're so into what's happening in reality. Okay, so let's look at this now in this point that once the mind is in the first jhana and fit for work, and it is a skill that has been developed. It's sort of like once you learn a violin player, once that violin player can learn and play flawlessly Beethoven's violin concerto in D minor, he can play all four of the main violin concertos. The Mendelssohn, the Brahms, and the Tchaikovsky are going to be fairly easy for him to learn once he's learned the Beethoven. Do you get the point that I'm making? Another way of looking at it is that in order to play one note on a violin, just one note on a violin, you need a violin. You need the curl, you need the bass, you need the back, you need the box, you need the throat, the neck, you need one string at least. Okay? And so this is what our practice is get that body going, get that curl going, get that string tight so that we can play that one note of first jhana. Once we do that, the second, third, and fourth string comes fairly easy. And so this is a way of looking at it is that most of the Westerners, as soon as they get first jhana, they just touch it. And now all of a sudden they have dreams for second, third, and fourth jhana. Right? You can't stay where we are. We've got something absolutely marvelous, and we still want more. Instead of recognizing that the first jhana, well, hello, Alex.
Hello.
Oh, you've got a full beard now, huh?
Hello.
Okay,
Full
so
beard. Yeah, I'm using some hair growth oil. You know, just fixing up the skin bag.
Okay, well, we're talking about jhana, and the distinction that we're actually looking at, the first jhana is the middle path. And so one of the things that happens when people get into the second jhana and they do it the first time is such a strange, marvelous experience to figure out that the thoughts are gone, that there are actually nothing verbal is happening anymore. That's such a surprise for most people that they will jump right back into hindrances. Okay, why? Because they don't have the first jhana well established. Then, in fact, the right way to do it is get the first jhana so well established. Okay, an example of that is you've seen these artificial rock walls where people climb at the gym or something like that. Wouldn't you rather have those guys climbing that wall with the ropes and the things that you're going to step on are all arranged? How about on a ledge, a straight vertical rock wall, let us say the Matterhorn, because there's people who want to climb that Matterhorn the hard way, okay? But if you don't have the right skills and the right ropes, you're going to fall. Well, that's what happens with the second, third, and fourth jhana. People will fall out of them because they don't have the base that they need, which is the first jhana. And so all of the work that we're going to be putting in is to get the mind into the first jhana and keep it there, to sustain it. Okay, and so this is the first thing then we're going to do. Once the mind is fit for work, we're going to take the first object, which is staying in first jhana, to apply and sustain and apply and sustain over and over and over again until we can get it. One of the examples would be that once you're in the first jhana, let us say sitting with your eyes closed and you know how good you feel, then try opening your eyes and maintaining that. Then stand up and continue maintaining it. And pretty soon you can walk around. This is also part of the reason why they do walking meditations. If you can walk yourself into first jhana, then you can walk around in first jhana. And this is the point. This is a state of living where you've got everything that you need. What is that? You've got safety, security, comfort, satisfaction, success. You've got a comfortable body. Yeah, I mean, what else can you need? That's it. Then, in fact, if you've got the first jhana, what else could you possibly need? But if you are in the first jhana, then we want to actually take a look at these first jhana factors. That's the next point, is that the first jhana's factors that we're going to mostly concentrate on is that applied and sustained thought, to keep the thoughts wholesome. One after another, wholesome thoughts. So, once we get the thoughts all wholesome, now we can do something else. And the characteristic is that if our thoughts are all wholesome, we feel really, really good. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at it without talking ourselves into it or talking ourselves about it. We're just going to experience feeling this good. That's the second jhana. is that the mind goes quiet, and all we have to do is to investigate how good we feel. Wow. You know, the songs like from James Brown come up, the James Brown, I feel good. By the way, it does start off. There's something that we almost always miss because we're listening to the song itself. But the first thing it does is, "Wah! I feel good." Da, 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 da. Okay, so that's the whole point of it. That's that jhana that feels so good. Okay, is that scream, that squelch that is just so marvelous. Broke my table again. That was quite a scream.
Feels so good. You're breaking things over there.
Yeah. So now that we feel that jhana, that real feel good, we start looking at how good we feel. This is it. And we experience that. But that very, very high squeal doesn't last very long. It's almost like, yeah, the guy can climb to the top of Mount Everest, but he's not going to spend the night there, and he's certainly not going to build a bungalow. All right? That in fact, he better get up there early in the morning so he can use the afternoon to get off that hill, because he does not want to be up there at night. So this is kind of the way that we look at this piti, this strong, really, really over-the-top, exquisite feeling, just sort of relaxes. Okay, and it relaxes into the third jhana. So here are the analogies, by the way. I'll bring them in now. These analogies are in Sutta number 119, by the way, as well as many other places. In the first jhana, this analogy, they use it with a man who does bath powder, but my analogy is because of my grandmother. She made biscuits. And she made biscuits exactly the way that it's done in the suttas with bath powder, that you spread the biscuit dough out, and then she would take and put her fingertips in a bowl of water and then sprinkle the dough. It wasn't dough yet. It was just dry powder, dry flour. And we keep putting a little bit of water and pasting it until soon there is not leaky water coming out of this dough. It's not wet, but it is moist enough so that by kneading it around, it removes all the dry powder. Okay, so this is the analogy of the first jhana. What is the powder? It's the body and mind. What is the water that we're sprinkling on? It's the joy. It's how good we feel. Okay, now the second jhana, I really like this analogy because, strangely enough, in my lifetime, I've had many experiences that actually fit very well. The second jhana, the example, is in a pond or a body of water that is actually fed by a spring. It's called an artesian well or a spring well. Okay, and what the farmers will do, by the way, these springs normally come up at the base of a hill because the mountain is full of water. And out in the weight of the water from that mountain, inside it comes out and it just bubbles up out of the ground pretty close to the, and so I had a spring in my early childhood, but then when I was living in Cheraw, South Carolina, my landlord had built a dam around this artesian well spring and created what the Buddha was talking about. So now you have this pond that is hot water on the top, but it's got all of this bubbling water that's coming up from the bottom. It's not got a lot of air in it at all, but you can tell because of the temperature changes, and you can swim down to that artesian well, and when you get there, it is quite an experience, because the water is bubbling up and it's all kinds of different changes of the temperature around the body, and it's just a magnificent experience of and brings on goosebumps and shivers and all kinds of things. This is the example of the second jhana, is how good we feel because of this artesian well bubbling up. The water comes up to the surface and it changes around, and you're just standing in that stream and just, I mean, it would be very much like Buddha's version of a whirlpool bath. That's what we're looking at. That's the analogy of Buddha's whirlpool bath is the second jhana. All we could do is just experience these sensations that are just completely surrounding us. Okay, so that's the second jhana. But the third jhana then has the analogy of a lotus blossom that there's several different ways of looking at it. One is that the lotus comes up out of a fast flowing creek or brook, or it's coming out of the mud, or it's coming out of a pond. But whatever happens with that lotus coming out of that fast flowing stream that was mentioned, by the way, in the second jhana, the lotus flower, when it opens, it's dry. When the flower that's been buried under all of this gushing water comes up, it comes up dry. And what this is, and what that means is now we're taking as our object of observation, our meditation object, is now not how good we feel James Brown style, but how pleasant it is that I can rise above all of those wonderful feelings and stand up and be high and dry over them. Okay, so this is just, so it goes, we build up the feelings into the piti, and then it relaxes into the sukha, but the applied and sustained thought are not there because the mind is really, really focused. Okay, and so then the next analogy is the fourth jhana is used as like a shimmering sheet that's put around on top. It comes around and is this. And what that gives that analogy is not only the shimmering, but the fact that now it's hard to distinguish where the meditator starts and where the air around him starts. Okay, that this is kind of like a shield or a sheet. And this is what gives the example of not infinite space, but the boundaries of the space are loosened. That it's not really boundless, no boundaries, but more that the boundaries are very indistinct. Hard to find where the boundaries are. Okay, so you can also use these words that will help. The second jhana is piti. The third jhana is sukha, and the fourth jhana is upekkha. That's when you get really, really balanced, okay, and really sharp, because the mind now is so fit for work that we can see how the mind itself works in this regard. Okay, and so this is where we really get into the teaching of Paticca because in fact, fourth jhana and Paticca are tightly related, mostly around the issue of perception. Because the way that it works is that our eyes and our ears and our consciousness brings in new information from the outside world, and then we process it through our act of perception. In the Pali, it's nama rupa, and that this thing happens that we mix the past with it. So when we're in the fourth jhana, that means that we can see this process happening clearly, that we recognize that what I see is not what I see. What happens on the outside world is processed, and when we stop processing it, that means that we bring the perception to an end. We stop the processing and just leave the raw data coming in. That's what we're talking about. That's why Paticca, the Buddha figured that out, because he had the ability to be in fourth jhana so that he could see this stuff. And so we bring perception to an end, and when perception is brought to an end, so are the feelings. Feelings come to an end because we're not perceiving anything. We're just receiving the data as input, raw input without any processing. That's why I mentioned it. In fact, I'm talking about the fourth jhana when I say just enjoy the show. Don't process it. Don't try to figure out who done it. Don't judge the actor. Just watch and enjoy the show. And everybody, Lanka has a song, and in there everybody wants their money back. You know, we don't like the show. We want to fix the show. I want my money back. I want my money back. And Micah says, just enjoy the show. Just watch what's happening without trying to make sense out of it or try to fix it. That, but when we read this stuff in the sutras and things like that without quite understanding it, we get confused. Westerners get confused, but the people around the Buddha knew exactly what he was talking about because it was their native language and their native experience. Jhanas were already well known in those days. Okay? But now we're a brand new culture, brand new Western Buddhists that have to go through a whole lot of, jump through a lot of hoops that Buddhist students didn't have to jump through. We have to figure out what the language is. We have to figure out what these concepts are. The word jhana, in fact, the word jhana is probably the most misused word that has crept into English because these are actually natural states. Here's an example of fourth jhana. The 4-year-old is sitting on the floor watching the Coca-Cola that he has just spilled roll down and seep into the carpet. All right? People on drugs have those kinds of experiences, big time. They talk about it a lot. The guy's on LSD and he's sitting there and he's looking at a worm. And he's got nothing else better to do. The mind is actually in those states to where he's not processing. He doesn't have the word worm. He doesn't have any plans where the worm is going to go. He doesn't know anything about the worm. He's just enthralled with this show. So these are natural states. Humans go into this. A good example of first jhana is when you are reading a book or reading an article on the internet. If you can read it one line after another and know at the end of this paragraph of what the next paragraph is starting, when you're into the next paragraph, you have the reference for the last paragraph. Most people don't read that way. Most people get interested, they'll start to read, and they'll get an idea about what they're reading, and now they're starting to think about what they thought about, and their eyes are still moving around the page, but they're not picking up. How many times does that happen to you?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Most speed reading is getting into first jhana.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
so
most of the trainings for them.
Mm-hmm. So these jhana states are quite natural. They may have a different degrees, like how much piti, how much sukha you can have when you're out actually reading, but mostly we're talking about enjoying it. We do that with games too. Solitaire, Sudoku, any of those kind of games. We just get focused right into that game, and we're not thinking about anything else. We don't get lost in thought when we're playing the game. We stay on the game. Focused, maybe. If we really want to break some rules, we can say there we concentrate. But the second jhana, then, a natural analogy for the second jhana would be a Formula One racer. If he keeps his eye on that road, he's going to be okay. If he takes his eye off that road just 1 second, he'd probably be a dead meat. That's one thing that's very, very interesting about Formula One racers. Very rarely does any of them actually retire as a winner. Almost all of them die in a crash because they're trying to get someplace. Okay, so the analogy then of the story is because Formula One is not done in a track like at Darlington 500 or Rockingham or any of the Indianapolis on a track. The Formula One uses actual streets, and they block them off and whatever like that. And so the circuit is all kind of confusing with lots of different turns. So here this Formula One racer is just tooling down the road, and a little old lady walks out on the road. If he has the thought, old lady, you ought not be here, he just killed her.
Yep.
Because he's thinking about her rather than avoiding her.
Yep.
Okay? You can see this also in martial arts, and it's called being in the flow. So what I'm wanting to point out to you right now is that these jhana states are normal human states. They're not super duper special, and there's something of obviously they're not attainments. Not
Hey,
a
whoever's
payment,
noise
so
that
the
is,
natural outflow
can you
of
mute
having
your
the
mic?
mind in a good state. I'm sorry, somebody who?
I don't know who's like the noise that is. Maybe it's the car. Not sure.
Okay.
Can you mute the mic? Yeah, just so we can hear. Thanks.
Okay, Eric, you got a question?
Yeah, just to confirm that I'm getting it. It's just that it's a little bit confusing that you say that first jhana is the most important, like what we have to focus on, but then that it's in fourth jhana that we really see paticca samuppada. So first, my question is whether or not like the difference is, as you said, first getting the mind established in first jhana, so then you can be established in the higher jhanas. That was my
Let us
first
say
question.
it's more like this, that the house has a living room. The living room is the first jhana, but you have 3 doors that go to other rooms. You got a kitchen, you got a toilet, you got a bedroom. Okay, so you live in the living room, but occasionally you go to the toilet. Occasionally you go to the kitchen. You spend a lot of time in the bedroom laying down. Okay, so that's a very good analogy for the 4 jhanas. Again, the first jhana is home. That's the resting place. But if people want the higher jhanas, they can have them, but when they fall out of them, they fall back into the hindrances, back into ordinary life. And so we need to actually practice the first jhana well enough so that that becomes our basis point, which is basically, as Aaron and I were just discussing, just having a positive aspect. That in fact, you can actually see where the jhana dude just came out of the 4th jhana. He says, "Oh, I just lost it." Well, now he's not only lost the 4th jhana, he's lost the first one too, because he's in negativity. Oh, I had it and now I don't have it. Let me go get it again, right? And so that's the problem, is that we don't have the first jhana very, very well established. So DJ, you got a question?
I'm sorry, I had like a follow-up question. That was just if I may.
Go ahead.
So then maybe it's a necessary question. If it is, yeah, don't mind it. But if you say that all the jhanas were well known before the noble Dhamma was established with the Buddha, then
I'm
what
not
were
saying
all
that
the
every Tom, Dick, and Harry did all those jhanas. I'm saying that it was part of the culture, the knowledge of it. That the Buddha, in fact, had been able to do the first jhana when he was still a child. That's
No.
that's in Sutta number 36 and in number 26, I believe, that they talk about that. It's the story of the rose apple tree. Okay, so go ahead with your question.
Yeah, and you were also saying that these are natural states. So my question is like, can we learn something from the wrong practice of all those centuries of like incomplete Dhamma, or like what made the Buddha's innovation so special that like the innovation sounds so simple that I don't see it as special, you know, like getting established in the first jhana.
I'm still not following what your question is.
Yeah, maybe I don't have a clear question, but
okay.
Like it's just that in retrospective, in hindsight, the innovation of the Buddha sounds so simple that I don't know why it wasn't common knowledge, you know, the way you were
It
exposed to it.
was common knowledge within the Sangha. In fact, I would say that it was common knowledge in India. By the 7th century AD, it was common knowledge. That's why the Brahmins hated Buddhists so much. They hated them because the teaching of the Buddha was common knowledge, and the common knowledge of the teaching of the Buddha puts the Brahmins right out of business. Why would somebody give all of their family land? Let's say that the farmer You know, in America, they don't want to have death taxes or inheritance taxes. Well, they've got inheritance taxes big time in India. What is the inheritance tax? If grandpa wants to be buried and have the cremation ceremony done by the Brahmins, he's going to have to give all the family land, and his family gets nothing, and the Brahmins gets it all, just so he can have a good send-off. Okay, so that's the basis of it, is greed. And so Buddhism from the 7th century up until the 14th century went through one pogrom after another until finally the Mongols from Turkish came in to help the Brahmins completely wipe out the Buddhist. Okay, that in fact is still considered dangerous. The noble teaching of the Buddha, that's why Bhikkhu Buddhadasa wouldn't teach it. That's why in Thailand they wouldn't teach it openly. It has to be done within the Sangha. It has to be done within the monks, and the monks don't tell the lay people. And the reason for that was because of the tragedies that have happened. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa in the 1930s decided that, hey, it's time for the secrecy to be over. Let's let the whole population of Thailand have a shot at the noble Dhamma, to take it out of the realm of religion into the realm of everybody gets a huge benefit and changing their lives from a negative life to a positive life right here in this life. And we can all do that. We can live
And
that life.
Dhammarato, may I add to that?
Yes, go ahead.
So the great importance of the Buddha's teaching is that the Brahmins told you to get in jhana and sit there and shut up and die and come back into the same class, the same caste over and over again. The Buddha said, no, no, no. We get liberation in this very life. Investigate. See that you generate these states. See that the whole universe that you live in is in fact inside of you from the time that you were born until the time that you die. At which point, boop, you're back to the universe again. Because a cloud never dies. It just turns into water, falls at the bottom of the mountain. Dhammarato swims in it, and then it floats right back up the mountain to be more water. The Brahmins didn't like this because then they couldn't keep you down in your rebirths.
Right.
And the Buddha says, it might happen, it might not happen, but I tell you what's good right now, and what's going to be good in the middle, and what's going to be good in the end. Let's get to it. And that's the innovation.
So, DJ, you got your hand
Thank
up.
you.
Yes, that was good, Alex. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you,
Oh, yeah, wonderful. I think Alex actually put up his hand before me. If you want to address his question first, or
Oh, Alex, yes, Alex Pappas. Okay, Alex, you got a question.
Hey, yeah, two actually, real brief. So, first one, I just wanted to check with you. It seems that sometimes I can actually just, the first jhana, you can just feel good. You can just kind of remind yourself. You can remember, oh, I could just feel good right now, but it doesn't require a whole lot of like a building up of wholesome thought into that. It's more just like, oh, I know what this feels like. I can just feel good. But obviously, I trust my experience. But Dhammarato, does that resonate, or does that resonate with you guys as well? That at some point, after some point of practicing that, you can just feel good and you're just there.
Mm-hmm. And if you feel good and feel good and continue to feel good, boy, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Like when you sit outside, you find shapes in clouds when you're a kid. Oh, that one looks like a train. Oh, that one looks like this, that. I think that might be real close to first jhana. And I think that would be what we're talking about when we talk about the rose tree and the Buddha happening to trip his way into it. Just from having causes and conditions. And this is what I think is very important about first jhana, is when you collect all the characteristics of first jhana, you then understand that to proceed from first jhana to second jhana to third jhana to fourth jhana, you're not adding anything. You're removing characteristics and choosing, So this is why first jhana is so important, because if you could hold it 5 things, you could probably hold 4 things. And then you probably hold 3 and 2 and 1. And eventually you can stop holding shit and just pay attention.
Right, exactly. So the first thing that we eliminate then from the first to the second jhana is the applied and sustained thought that got us into the first jhana and keeps us in first jhana. To go into second jhana, we stop thinking about and just experience.
Yes.
So
Okay.
the second
Now,
jhana then has piti as its number one point, and we get rid, or we let that subside, and so we lose the piti, leaving only the sukha. And then the fourth jhana is when we leave that absolute happy satisfaction into a basic, there it is. There's nothing to do here except just look. So all of the good feelings of the first jhana then are eliminated by the fourth jhana, leaving only the process of the mind. And now we start playing with that until we bring that processing.
Is that what Buddhadasa means by the non-concocted mind? We're
Yes.
no longer concocting anything.
No longer concocting, exactly. But that's also in all the jhanas, because in the first jhana we're not concocting.
Dhammarato.
We're not concocting. We're experiencing and talking about how nice it is right here, right now. We're not concocting. We're in fact getting the mind in alignment with actual reality. That's why we don't want to be starting our practice while we're being on the cross, being crucified. That's not a good place to practice. But if you're on the cross, it would have been good if you'd had a whole lot of practice, because now you'll be able to handle it. Okay, but we don't want to practice in a tough situation. This is also what we mean by within music, and also in psychology, we have practice, performance, and then play. But the performance is how we practice when we're practicing in public, but we still have to work at it to keep it, make sure it's right. But like the violinist who has played the violin concerto, let us say 75 or 100 times in public, and also practice it and played it alone, she can walk out on that stage with that violin and own the place. And she's just having a ball while she plays that violin concerto. She's not worried about missing a note, because she's not going to miss one, because she's got that thing down so much, and you can see everything wiggles a little bit more because the musician now is dancing while they're playing. And so instead of just doing it like that, they go, and just love what they're doing, right? And the reason for it is because they've got it down. So that's an example of a musician being in first jhana, is because they've got it, and they know that they've got it. And so this is the practice. And as Alex was saying, that the higher jhana factors is nothing but then removing, and the fourth jhana is when we stop perceiving things and leaving the show just as it is. So the nama rupa comes to an end slowly. And you've heard or you've seen in the sutras, they talk about things like infinite consciousness. Well, it's not infinite, but that's all there is. It's just a flood of intake. We've talked about infinite space in the sense that the boundaries about who I am and the environment that I am get very, very loose. We also talk about perception and non-perception. That's when we can perceive perception itself. The example is a clay bowl that has had oil in it, and then all the oil is taken out, but still there's oil in the bowl. You can take and you can rub your finger around and get oil off of the bowl, but you can't pour the oil. So this is the way that we look at that state of neither perception or non-perception, is that we have perception on just enough to know that we're enjoying the show. And then we go into that state of nothing, because now we've got perception turned off completely. And when perception is turned off, all feelings are turned off, because you actually have stopped that paticca samuppada at the place of perception. That's the fourth jhana. The first jhana is only a few steps above, and that is at the state of feelings. So we learn to control the feelings, and then these other jhanas only take us a couple of steps down to the fourth jhana, is at perception. And when we manage the perception so that we can turn it on and turn it off and decide how we're going to process and all of that kind of stuff, then that's really a pleasant abiding, just to be able to sit and take input. Now, the next thing that I have to emphasize is that these states are not magical, they're not special, they're not highfalutin, they're not out of sight. but they are extensions of the first jhana. And so to get it into those states, you have to cultivate and get going and get in very, very good skill levels of that first jhana. Well, we've got several people. Now it's time for you, DJ. Your turn.
All right. Yeah, question is in terms of the speed as well, right? So we're cultivating and developing the first jhana, right? This is kind of the base camp, right? And then the higher jhanas sort of, naturally sort of unfold from that as well. But in a way too, right? So like in the second, it's sort of just the dropping of sort of the applied and sustained thought, the verbal thought, and it's just the pitsy, right? So it's just going into the feeling of it. So you can kind of play around maybe with this, right? Like in terms of like, okay, wholesome thoughts arise. Okay, isn't this like lovely? We're kind of working it in, and then it just drops, and then just the experience of it, right? So it's a little bit like insightful in a way. You're just experiencing that experience, but like almost you could start in a way from a breath, and then again we're breathing quite long, there's a lot of mind moments in there. Start with the breath, have a verbal thought or whatever, and then it drops off and kind of just in a way drop or go all the way up, however you want to put it, right? In terms of like the jhanas, because they can go quite quickly. It doesn't need to be like, oh, I got into fourth jhana for 15 minutes or something, right? And that's sort of like a craving kind of thing. It's just, it can be rather quick.
Okay, well, when you're let us put it on this point then, that as soon as you recognize that you have come out of whatever jhana states or anything like that, the best thing you can do is to congratulate yourself for having done it. Because what we're not normally going to do is wish for it back again.
Yeah.
And if we wish for it back again, that's a hindrance. But if we can congratulate ourselves, that's staying positive with it. Okay,
Yeah,
so this is what the vipassana or the insight is merely nothing but trying to figure out what's wholesome and what's unwholesome. And when we can figure out what's wholesome, every moment that we can figure it out, we can stay in that wholesome state.
Yeah.
And that's what the jhanas are really all about, is being able to get rid of those hindrances and come into a state of wholesome thoughts. And then we let the thoughts subside, and then we let the feelings subside. And once we let the feelings subside, there's not much left. There's not much left except just pure observation. So, did that answer your question, DJ? Or did you just take the... Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was just...
So Alec Pappas, you've got your hand up. You've got a question.
Yeah, I actually had a follow-up question from before. So the fourth jhana, it sounds like to me what that is, so we're saying that we come into, or we come out of, we relax out of experiencing, or not, we don't relax out of, we relax out of the feeling, we relax out of holding on to or sitting on that pleasant feeling, and we relax deeper into just experiencing this as it is, and the perceptions are very loose. And to me, what that sounds like is natural rest without seeking or describing anything. So there's no sense of concepts, there's no, and what I've, it's interesting because I was actually going to ask you, Dhammarato, this is a practice that I like to do quite often, actually, is just whenever there's any kind of point of view, so you could say thought, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome, I just remind myself, I was like, oh, I remembered, and then I rest without seeking or describing anything, and do that very many small moments throughout the day. And what I've noticed is the benefit of rest, the benefit of relaxation that comes from the initiation of those jhanas is present immediately in doing that, in resting without seeking or describing anything. So I was just curious if that's equivalent to the fourth jhana when that's happening.
Yes, but I wouldn't bother with trying to put the names back on those kind of states. Is that the fourth jhana?
Right.
What I'm
Yeah.
actually inviting you guys to do, to stay in your experience
Yeah.
without trying to name it and say, oh, this must be fourth jhana because of blah blah blah, but rather that when you in fact, if you're thinking about it being fourth jhana, when you're going into the fourth jhana, you're not going into the fourth jhana.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the next point is that when you come out of that state, then you can reflect upon it.
Sure.
That's the whole point, that in fact you cannot even understand the fourth jhana until you come out of it.
Yes.
And then you
That-
can reflect upon it.
Yeah,
Because
so
the mind is so quiet that you all you know is this experience of nothing's happening.
Yes.
There is
Yeah.
nothing there. First there was sensory input, and now we're not even paying attention to the sensory input, and there's just nothing there. And
Yeah,
that's the end to it. Now here's the point about that. Once we get to the point of there's nothing there, then you see a lot of people that we can go back to the Abhaya Sutta on that, where the teaching of the bark tree guys, basically, when we think of people wearing bark as a costume or clothing, we think of pine trees. That's not the kind of bark we're talking about. At best, it's like birch bark. You know, it's actually, you can make clothing out of the bark by peeling the tree, and so it's pliable. It would be very much like having leather. But anyway, Baya was one of these guys, and what their whole point in life was is to find the self in there. Who am I? Who is the guy that can see the formations inside the mind, the Salayatana? Who is it that feels? Who is it that is experiencing the sensory input? Who is it that way? So that's the situation. I think that somebody just published this on the Skype group.
Yeah,
and
I saw that article.
Right. And so the point then is that once we get the mind into that state, then the seeing is merely the seeing. The heard is merely the heard, which means we're not trying to figure out what it is that we heard. We're not trying to figure out what it is that we saw. We're just letting it be.
Yeah.
So whatever we bring in, they use it like cognized. Whatever comes in, that's all there is to it. And we're not adding anything new. Okay, and that's why Baya was able to then get into that state, recognizing that it was just a state, that there was no one in that state. There was no selfishness or self there, because selfishness is a kind of a thought. It's a kind of an unwholesome thought. If you have a self, that's hindrance. And so this is how, Alex, you can look at that fourth jhana is that there's just nothing to it. I mean, there's a joke in there someplace. There's nothing to it.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you, because this isn't my current experience, right? But I wanted to ask you about this because this seemed to be the most true of experiences. So I was driving in my car and I just decided, I reminded myself to rest naturally without seeking or describing anything. And what had happened next is the same thing that happened to me 2 years ago when I had like an awakening experience, where what had happened was, it was as though all of a sudden I saw the body as an organism that I birthed, that was kind of like my baby, kind of almost like my embryo. And what I actually was the governing awareness or space that contained this body. And that's why I say embryo, because the awareness, if you look, like, awareness is the metaphor for the mother, and then the body is the embryo. And it was so directly profound. And a few days later, there was just like this perfume of that, and then it left. And I believe it probably left because at some point there was like a praising of it, and with the praise of it, there was the fear of losing it. And then as soon as there was a fear of losing it,
then you've
it was
lost
lost. So
and the
I
fear
was curious if you could speak to that, though, and talk, what is that happens, and is that experience the ultimate end to these practices that we're doing?
Yes, that's what I'm saying is that there is an end to it all, and the end to it is when the mind is so quiet that it's no longer perceiving anything, which means that we're not making sense out of it, which means that what we made out of it, the sense we made out of it, doesn't contact us, and so therefore there's no feelings. We have literally short-circuited that sequence of Paticca Samuppada at step 4 now. Rather than it go for 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up to 12, which is the suffering. So the first thing that we do is we get it at the point of, in fact, you and I have worked at this, Alex, is, yeah, I don't get what I want, but I'm still okay.
Right.
Right? So that's the point of early practice, that I don't get what I want, but I'm still okay. And then we start looking at, oh, well, I can feel the way that I want to now. That I can be happy without having to have what I was thinking that I wanted. So that's so here's the analogy now from that is that we're going to, every time that we fall out, it's like falling off of a mountain. I was 2/3 up the mountain when I fell off. I want to pick myself up, dust myself off, and be back up on that 2/3 up the mountain. And that doesn't work the way that it. If I fall off that mountain, I'm going to have to climb that mountain all over again. Or another one is if you get 2/3 up a ladder and you fall off of that ladder, you can't just say, well, I'm back again and I'm back up to 2/3 of the ladder. No, you got to start from wrong one again. That's why we're talking about the first jhana over and over and over again. All right, you keep coming back to the first jhana, and then we can then get these few steps of Paticca Samuppada, which means that we can get ourselves back into that state of neither perception nor non-perception, and then into the nothingness. And here's the point about that. Nobody's going to live their life that way. That's not a place of living. That's just a place of recognizing how far can I take this practice? How high is that mountain? But you don't live on the mountain top all the time. You don't stay there. You move around. Okay, and so the base camp then is going to be the first jhana. And so this is where all of the skill development needs to be done, is getting the mind back into that wholesome, happy state over and over and over again. And not worry about these higher jhanas, because they're, you can take the Buddha's word for it. There's nothing more after that. Why do I even have to go spend the time there to prove it to myself? Because I've already got the Sukha, which is the entire teachings of the embodiment of the Buddha in first jhana. The first jhana is the path to what the Buddha was looking for when he rejected the higher jhanas. Yes. That we're going to do the middle path here. We're not going to take one extreme or the other. There's no reason to go and stay in the fourth jhana. There's nothing to it. It's just abiding in a pleasant state, but you can't live that way. The monks who do the fourth jhana can't stay in the fourth jhana when they go on Bendabat. You can't walk around like that. That you've got to come back into the being able to make sense out of your world, or you won't be able to find the path. That in fact, that's the story about Baddati or Maya. Is that he died the day that the Buddha taught him about this fourth jhana, because he was not staying in a state of safety. He was out wandering around, and he wandered into a cow, and he wasn't afraid of the cow, and the cow killed him.
Lots of cows kill people back then.
And so I would not ever expect fourth jhana to be either a goal or necessary or a desirable place to be. It's much more likely to see it as just the natural outcome of your consistently doing the first jhana, that you will just get into these states of wow, you know. and so this is the way of understanding it is that the first jhana is the goal. The first jhana is all of the work that you need to do, and all that you need to do is get the mind cleaned out. And then we go back to the shampoo Dhamma, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, over and over again. And so this is what we have to say. Alex, John, you got your hand up.
If it's okay, I wanted to thank everyone in Sangha for sharing experiences, especially personal experiences, because I love to hear them. But also I wanted to add to something on the jhana side. I know first jhana is all you need to be liberated here and now. Yet one thing I find particularly interesting, and it helps me understand better first jhana, is with the practice of the jhanas, I directly through my experience prove to myself that my world is moment by moment constructed by myself. What this means is when I do happen to walk in Walmart and kick a shelf or something silly and I'm out, I can immediately go, hey, why be out? Why not just be in? And then gather the causes and conditions, and guess what? It's a natural state. First jhana will arise. You can't make it not happen if the causes and conditions are there.
It's a natural state. People pass in and out of the first jhana all the time. The question is, do you know what you're doing when you're doing it?
And even when we look at positive psychology in the West right now, we see positive psychology calls jhana something like a flow state. But even they believe in positive psychology that it is a special state, limited only to athletic maneuvers or something like this. But that's not the case. They just don't have the depth of culture that was there available to the Buddha, who when he went and he was slam shifting jhanas, he understood, hey, this is not what I want, because what the Brahmin wants me to do is sit here in Nirodha Sampati and he wants me to just rot. But I'm going to come back out and I'm going to show them, I'm going to build a beautiful world right here, right now in this moment and in this very life. And I think it's so gorgeous to think like that. So, I mean, you got to follow someone's example. Why not follow somebody like that?
Exactly so.
Right. But thank you. Thanks for letting me share too, guys. I appreciate all of you.
Yeah, that's going back to the idea of Sangha. Yes, let's practice together. We can help each other in a very positive way. That you're not on your own. This is not a lonely trip at all. This is all friendship.
We got.
So, DJ, does that answer enough of your questions about jhana in general?
Oh yeah, no, it was wonderful. Yeah, it is wonderful.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, does anybody have any parting words? Anybody got anything left? Nick, how about you? Do you have anything to say?
I just love chilling with you guys. It's always a good time, but no questions.
Nice to meet you,
spending time in jhana with y'all.
Welcome, man. Welcome. So let's go ahead and finish this call. I really appreciate it. We've actually gone quite a while now. It's been almost 2 hours, but we didn't record until 30 minutes in. So anyway, guys, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. You make my day. You make my life. I really love you guys. Thank you.
Love you guys too.
Thank you.
So we'll see you Monday.
Thank you. Take care, days.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. That was a great call.
Wonderful call.